All right, so, I'm really into this whole proper human diet thing.
Yeah, you've been sending me all this stuff.
I have this Dr. Ken Berry video from 2024.
Right.
I think you'll find it's really interesting.
Yeah.
Like, he does not hold back at all.
Okay.
Let's dive right in.
Okay.
So, concept number 1, nutrient density.
Makes sense.
Right, and that makes sense on the surface.
Yeah.
But then he just hits you with this truth bomb that organ meats liver,
Yeah.
more nutrient dense than kale
Right.
and spinach.
Wow.
And this is one of those things where I thought I was like, superfoods this and superfoods that.
Right.
And then to hear him talk about that, I'm like, man, really makes you think twice about what you think,
So what's interesting about this, and it's funny because it's like a new fad.
Right.
But if you look historically, like organ meats were like the prized foods
Yeah.
of cultures all around the world.
Mm.
And it makes sense if you think about it for a second.
Yeah.
These organs were essentially what kept the animal alive.
Right.
So of course, they would be the most nutrient-dense part
It's like they knew.
and like the most beneficial for us to eat.
Yeah, like our ancestors were onto something.
Totally.
It makes you think, like, what else don't we know
Right.
that we've just forgotten over time?
Totally.
That's fascinating.
And that leads us perfectly into the next concept, which is the carbohydrate knob,
Oh, okay, the carb knob.
which I love. He uses this analogy of a volume dial
Okay.
because everybody's different, right?
Right, like some people like it loud, some people like it quiet on radio.
Exactly. And some people feel great on low carb.
Right.
Some people need more.
Yeah.
You just kind of have to figure out what works best for you.
So how do we find our sweet spot?
You really have to pay attention to your body.
Yeah.
If you are feeling that sugar crash in the afternoon or after you eat a bunch of carbs,
Oh, yeah.
your body's telling you something,
Interesting.
you need to adjust that dial.
Okay. I like it.
So that leads us to the next concept,
Yeah.
which is kind of along the lines of this feeling good or not,
Okay.
which is the food sensitivities.
Okay.
Because sometimes we eat things and we're like, ooh, that didn't sit well.
Yeah, or I don't feel great,
Yeah,
but I don't know why.
right. And he gets into things like oxalates, saponins, lectins.
What are those?
These are all compounds found in plants.
Okay.
And they can actually cause a lot of inflammation in our bodies.
Right.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't realize this.
Okay.
And it can manifest in a bunch of different ways.
Like what?
Bloating, skin issues, brain fog, even exacerbate other conditions that you may already have.
Wow. I would have never put that together.
So it's really about paying attention
Okay.
because knowledge is power, right?
So how do we know? Like, how do we pinpoint what it is?
It really is a little bit of a detective game.
Okay.
You have to pay attention to how you feel after you eat things
Okay.
and kind of go from there.
And that leads us to feeling good or not feeling good.
Clears throat.
Satiety.
Yes,
Satiety. I feel like this is something we're all after.
of course. Yeah,
Like that feeling of fullness
Right.
when you're satisfied after you eat.
exactly.
But let's be real, sometimes that bag of chips is calling your name
Oh, yeah.
a little too loud.
It happens to the best of us.
So what do we do about it?
So he talks about how different macronutrients actually affect our hunger hormones differently.
So it's not just about, giving in to the cravings. It's really about being more strategic.
Yeah, and understanding how to actually feel fuller for longer.
Okay.
And this goes back to the nutrient-dense foods.
Okay.
Things like protein, healthy fats. They're going to send much stronger signals to your brain
Okay.
than those processed carbohydrates
Right.
that leave you wanting more.
Interesting.
I
So
mean-
everything's really starting to connect here, like
Yes.
from nutrient density to being aware of your carbs, listening to your body.
Right.
It's all
They're
connected.
building blocks.
And speaking of building blocks, he goes on to connect fasting and ancestral eating as these two concepts that kind of go hand in hand.
They do.
Like he's saying, let's take a step back in time and see how humans used to eat
Exactly.
and what we can learn from that.
Totally. And that is a great place to take a quick break.
So fasting and ancestral eating.
Yeah, they really do kind of go together.
Okay.
They're kind of like two peas in a pod.
So tell me more about the fasting part because, I get a little nervous when he starts talking about extending that eating window beyond,
Yeah.
just skipping breakfast.
Right. Well, and it makes sense to be a little nervous because it is so contrary to everything we've been told.
Totally.
But when you really think about it and you really listen to what he's saying,
Yeah.
it's not about starving yourself.
Okay.
It's just really giving your body a break from digesting
To reset. Right.
so it can focus on other functions.
Like what?
Like, for example, he talks about improved insulin sensitivity.
Okay.
which, of course, helps keep your blood sugar levels more stable.
Right.
He talks about something called autophagy.
Autophagy.
Which is essentially where your body starts to clear out all those old damaged cells.
Interesting.
And, there's even been some research that suggests there might be some brain health benefits.
Really?
From fasting, yeah.
Wow. And that makes sense, right?
It does.
Because if your body's not having to constantly digest food, it can focus on other things.
Exactly. It's like giving your body a break.
Interesting.
To do some house cleaning.
I like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And, if we look at it from an ancestral standpoint, it makes sense that our bodies would be really good at fasting.
How so?
Because our ancestors probably didn't have access to food all the time.
Right, like we do.
Yeah, they weren't going to the grocery store every day.
Or it was feast or famine back then.
Exactly.
Exact point.
So our bodies would have adapted to be able to function.
To thrive in that environment.
Exactly.
Interesting.
So it's kind of cool to think about how we can tap into those innate abilities that our ancestors had.
So bring it back to Dr. Berry's recommendations then. Like, what would be considered like an ancestral way of eating?
So when he talks about ancestral eating, he's basically talking about eating whole, unprocessed foods.
Okay.
Things that our hunter-gatherer ancestors would have eaten.
So meat.
Meat, seafood.
Okay.
Fruits, vegetables.
Nuts and seeds.
Nuts and seeds, exactly.
So really just cutting out all the processed stuff?
Essentially, yes.
It's funny because he made this connection between ancestral eating and then this next concept of factory-made versus one-ingredient foods.
Yes, and I love this concept.
Me too.
Because it's so simple.
It is.
It's like he's giving you a cheat sheet for the grocery store.
Right.
Look at the ingredient list.
Right.
The shorter, the better.
And if you can't read it,
exactly,
it's probably not good for you.
It's probably doing something to that food that doesn't need to be done.
Yeah, like why are there so many ingredients?
Exactly. It's crazy.
It's mind-blowing.
So then that leads us to this concept of minerals.
Yes.
Which I have to say, I don't think I really thought much about minerals before.
Really?
Until he brought it up.
And now I'm like, am I getting enough minerals?
Right, because even if you're eating healthy foods, the soil is so depleted now.
Oh, right. He talked about that.
From modern farming practices.
Yeah.
That a lot of the foods that we're eating, even the fruits and vegetables,
that don't have the minerals that they used to.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's kind of scary.
It is a little bit.
So what do we have to supplement all the time or?
Well, he does suggest considering like a high quality mineral supplement.
Okay.
But he also emphasizes that food should always come first.
Of course.
This is not about replacing real food.
Right.
It's about filling in the gaps.
Okay. I like that.
Making sure that you're getting...
Yeah, like an insurance policy.
Exactly.
Okay.
So that your body has what it needs to function properly.
So we've talked about, nutrient-dense foods, being mindful of our carbs, listening to our bodies, fasting, ancestral eating.
Right.
It feels like a lot, but it also feels really empowering.
It is. It's about taking back control of your health.
Yeah.
And not feeling like you're at the mercy of, the latest fad diet or whatever.
Right. And he definitely does not like fad diet.
No, he does not.
Which I appreciate.
And I love how he talks about this because he sees most fad diets as kind of setting people up for failure.
Why is that?
Because they're so restrictive.
Right.
And they're not sustainable long term.
So it's like you're setting yourself up to fail from the beginning.
Exactly. And then people feel bad about themselves.
Right. Like they didn't do something right.
Right. Exactly. And it's like, no, it's not you. It's the diet.
It's the diet that's the problem. It's exactly.
So instead of, jumping on that latest fad diet bandwagon, it's about finding something that's more sustainable.
Yes. Find what works for you.
Okay.
And for your body.
Long term.
Exactly.
And that's really, I think, the big takeaway.
Yes. And it's not to say that things like keto or carnivore are bad.
Right.
He just sees them as modern day interpretations of how humans have eaten for a very long time.
So it's about taking the principles.
Yes.
And seeing how it works for you.
Exactly.
I like that.
So speaking of things that can be tough to give up.
Okay.
He doesn't sugarcoat it when he talks about sugar addiction.
No, he does not.
He's very upfront about the fact that sugar can be highly addictive.
Oh, it is.
Just like any drug.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
It's everywhere, and it's so hard.
Like, how do you avoid it? I know.
It's in everything.
I know. It's everywhere you turn.
So how do we break free?
Well, I think the first step is just being aware of it.
Okay.
Like understanding how sugar impacts your brain and your body.
So knowledge is power.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then you can start to make more conscious choices.
And that's where those cravings come in, though, right?
Yes. And the cravings can be intense.
Oh, they're so real.
I know.
And you just want to give in.
I know. But that's where those other concepts come into play.
Right.
Like focusing on satiating foods.
Okay.
Becoming aware of those food sensitivities.
Right.
Because when you're nourishing your body properly, you're going to be less likely to have those blood sugar swings that lead to the cravings.
Okay. That makes sense.
So it's really about...
It's like this multi-pronged approach.
Exactly. So that you're not feeling like you're at war with food all the time.
And speaking of feeling good, he has this really nice concept in there about like not breaking the bank.
Yes.
To eat healthy.
Yes, because it can get really expensive.
Oh my God.
The all organic and grass-fed and all that.
Especially these days.
I know.
So what does he say for people who are maybe working with a tighter budget?
He's very realistic about it.
Okay.
He says, do what you can with what you have.
Okay.
Start by incorporating the best quality foods that you can afford.
Okay.
And then as your budget allows you, you can gradually upgrade.
Okay.
So it's not about being perfect. It's about making progress.
Progress, not perfection.
Exactly.
Love it.
And I love that he emphasizes that because it can feel very overwhelming, especially with all the information out there.
Yeah.
It's like, what am I supposed to eat?
Right.
How am I supposed to afford this?
And there's some guilt, too.
Right. Yeah.
Like, oh, I can't buy the organic.
Totally.
Because I'm a bad person.
I know. It's like, just do the best you can.
Okay, good.
With what you have and go from there.
Love it.
So speaking of kind of bringing it all together, he wraps up his proper human diet principles with a concept.
Okay, hit me. Yeah. So we've got like nutrient density. We've got, the carb knob food sensitivities, feeling good with satiety. We've got fasting ancestral eating, one ingredient foods, all that good stuff.
Right.
Minerals, ditching the fad diets, sugar addiction. What's this 11th concept that brings it all home?
So he basically says, a proper human diet isn't about these rigid rules.
Or like, trying to be perfect.
Right.
It's about adopting an approach to eating
that
prioritizes those whole unprocessed foods and really just supports your individual needs and goals.
So it takes the pressure off.
Exactly.
You don't have to be perfect.
You don't have to be perfect.
Okay, good, because I'm not.
Me neither.
But I do like to feel good.
Right, and that's the thing he really emphasizes, like we have the power to take control of our health.
Yeah.
And instead of getting caught up in all the the latest fads or the conflicting advice.
Oh, there's so much out there.
There's so much. It's overwhelming.
It is. So where do we start then, like after this deep dive is over?
It's funny because the thing that really stuck with me through this whole video
was how much he emphasized just keeping it simple.
Okay.
Like getting back to the basics.
Okay.
Nourishing your body with nutrient-dense whole foods.
Okay.
The way that, humans ate for thousands and thousands of years.
Before all the processed stuff.
Exactly.
It's like hitting the reset button.
Exactly. And it's a journey, right?
Right.
It's not a race.
Right.
You're going to have good days, going to have bad days.
Listen to your body.
Listen to your body.
Okay.
And just adjust as needed.
Progress, not perfection. Progress, not perfection, exactly.
I love it.
But,
well, this has been super fascinating.
Yeah, it's really interesting stuff.
And I feel like we just scratched the surface.
We did.
But for our listeners who want to dive even deeper,
yes,
you can find a link to his full YouTube video in our show notes.
So
it's definitely worth checking out.
It is.
So go check that out. And then in the meantime,
go
forth
and
create a proper human diet that works for you.
There you go.
And until next time, happy eating, everyone.